Karen didn't cry, panic, curse men, or touchingly pity her daughter in general. She behaved as usual. Sitting across from Alice, she stroked her hand, saying, "Alice, it's best that you see his true face now, not later. People like him leave sooner or later, often in the hardest moments of life. Be glad that you won't have to regret wasted time and effort." Alice continued to cry, and Mum looked at her with understanding and compassion. Patiently waiting for the tears to stop, she brought a glass of water and said, hugging Alice's shoulders, "Actually, doing something familiar and ordinary helps a lot in such cases. Of course, unpleasant activities such as cleaning and washing dishes are excluded." Mum hated both, although she loved to cook and could create a culinary miracle from the simplest and cheapest products. "I hate washing dishes and cleaning," she usually informed her admirers sincerely, and frightened lovers of free comfort quickly disappeared from her life. Alice couldn't be like her mum. She couldn't stand up for her own interests, and another woman took Nathan away from her. 6 months ago, Alice had a happy event happen by chance. She was in the right place at the right time, and her modest life miraculously changed. She had just graduated from a pedagogical college and came to work in a kindergarten. Many old acquaintances were surprised by Alice's unfashionable choice. She did well in school and could have chosen a more prestigious and profitable profession. Only her mother, Granny, and her friend Stephanie were not surprised. They knew that Alice loved children, and Alice loved her. It was pointless to resist her vocation. One of her charges was a 3-year-old girl named Sherelle. She loved examining everything. She wasn't timid or intimidated. She just felt comfortable contemplating alone. After watching the new teacher for a couple of days, Sherelle decided that she could trust her, and from that day on, she started sharing with Alice drawings, stones, interesting leaves. Alice couldn't help but become attached to Sherelle the most. Usually, Sherelle's mother, a small, elegant blonde, slightly older than the teacher, came to pick her up. Tender, polite, and taciturn, she seemed like an enlarged copy of her little daughter. She raised her child alone, often looking sad and tired. According to the headmistress's story, they lived together. Sherelle, her mother, and her grandmother. Alice became even more fond of the girl. She herself grew up without a father, but she never doubted her mother's and grandmother's love and care throughout her childhood. It was the 3rd month of Alice's work in the kindergarten when, instead of Sherelle's mother, a strange man came to pick up the girl. He was a sturdy, charming, brown-haired man of about 25, energetic, tanned, with grey-blue eyes and a shining, self-confident smile. Alice felt that he understood that he made an impression on the young teacher, and it was even offensive. Did Sherelle's father remember Sherelle's existence finally? She thought, but said out loud, "I can't give the child to a stranger. It's in the interests of the safety of the entrusted children. Sherelle's mother didn't warn me that someone else would come for her." "No problem," the stranger generously said, took out his mobile phone, made a call, and said that the receiver, Margot, the most beautiful Mary Poppins, refused to give me Sherelle. Explain to her that I'm not a stranger. "Sorry, I forgot to warn you yesterday. My brother came, and I asked him to pick up Sherelle so I wouldn't run from work like crazy." Alice knew that Margot had a strict boss who was more likely to stay late for work than leave early. Sometimes all the children had already been picked up, and Alice and Sherelle were waiting for their mother. "Thank you for your vigilance, Alice Walker," declared the man with mock seriousness. "You can be trusted. Come to your uncle, Sherelle. Let's go home." Near the exit, he turned around with the girl in his arms. "Oh, and by the way, my name is Nathan." "Goodbye, Nathan," Alice said with a reserved smile, bidding farewell and forcing herself to immediately turn around and go to the group. She didn't want him to think he had impressed her. Anyway, it didn't work out for Alice. She kept thinking about Cheryl's uncle all evening, and the next day he came for his niece again. The usually cautious and reserved Cheryl ran to him, spreading her arms. "Uncle!" "Pardon me for asking. Is Margot all right?" Alice ventured to ask. "Everything's fine," assured Nathan. "I just thought I'd help my sister while I'm here. I'm out of contract, so I came to my folks for a vacation. I don't know how long I'll be here." Perhaps he was waiting for Alice to ask something, like where he worked, but she just nodded and said, "Okay, I see," immediately feeling how stupid and boring it sounded. "Oh, I almost forgot," the guy exclaimed, slapping himself lightly on the forehead. "This is for you," and he held out a box of expensive candy that seemed to come from nowhere. "Thanks," Alice marvelled, "but what's the occasion?" "In honour of getting acquainted," the guy smiled. The next day, he brought a big bouquet of roses. Cheryl eagerly accepted the gift on behalf of her favourite teacher. Before Alice could find the right words, the man picked up his niece, after saying goodbye, went out the door of the playgroup. Alice took the flowers home and told her mother about the new acquaintance. "He's not greedy, anyway," Karen laughed carelessly while admiring her daughter's bouquet. "The flowers are gorgeous. So many men don't give flowers nowadays. It's even funny to say that some men consider a woman mercantile for wanting a bouquet or a cup of coffee in a beautiful coffee shop. I will always support a man in difficult moments, but I'm not going to do it for a deliberate miser. One good thing is that you can recognize such men right away. Oh, I got distracted. Dear, you seemed surprised and confused. Why? It's a common occurrence. A young man has decided to court you in the classic way. That's not a bad thing, as long as he's not married. I wouldn't advise you to get involved with a married man. You're so pretty, Alice." Mum loved lyrical digressions, as she called them. She did not share the details of her personal life with Alice, but she loved to think aloud, and Alice could more or less understand what her mum was going through. Karen had a happy trait. She was always interested in life, even if life was not very smooth. It was probably because of this that she looked younger than her years, despite her modest income. Of course, she didn't hover in the clouds, but just floated a little above the asphalt and lawns. The next day Nathan came for Cheryl again. Seeing Alice, he pulled out 2 theatre tickets from the inside pocket of his jacket. "I have 2 tickets to the theatre on Saturday. I just want to know if Alice Walker agrees to go out with me." "We can try," Alice replied, "and our theatre is really good." On Saturday evening, Alice's friend Stephanie dropped by and caught Alice dressing up. Stephanie's eyes widened in amusement. "Wow, why are you putting on such a pretty dress? Something unusual has happened, and your best friend doesn't know. Now you just need to tell me everything," said Stephanie, ogling Alice in her new dress from all sides. Alice and Stephanie had been friends since kindergarten, although no one could explain why such different girls became such friends. Stephanie had little interest in other people. For a select few, she made an exception, including her childhood friend Alice. Stephanie's mother was very pleased with their friendship. In her opinion, responsive Alice, with her soft charm, wonderfully influenced her daughter. Stephanie was persistent, so Alice had to tell her about Cheryl's uncle. "Oh my goodness, I personally discouraged you from working in the kindergarten. And do you remember one of the main arguments?" "Yeah, of course I remember. You said it would be boring because I wouldn't meet anyone because there are only mums and grandmas there." Alice laughed, pulling out of the box the heels that she had only worn a couple of times. "I solemnly admit I was wrong," Stephanie declared. "Will you introduce me to him? You know I have a realistic view of things, and I'll tell you right away what your boyfriend's worth." "Stephanie, he's not mine yet. Don't rush things. We've recently met, and we're just going to the theatre. He left his hometown a long time ago, so maybe he has no friends left here, and probably that's why he invited me. No one to go out with. And I thought you'd be interested in my opinion. If I had a suitor, I'd introduce you right away. And, by the way, he could take his sister to the theatre, but he asked you. By the way, what does he do? He's an engineer, an oil man, used to work in the north on shifts. Now he doesn't want to anymore. He was going to look for something with a regular schedule and closer to civilization. Oh, he's not poor, I guess. Alice, are you sure he's not married? Alice just laughed. In fact, it was fortunate that Stephanie had dropped by. While the girl was giggling with her, she had no time to worry about whether she looked good enough and how the meeting would go. When Nathan called, Alice was long since ready. They were sitting in the kitchen. Karen and Stephanie were drinking coffee with chocolate chip cookies, and Alice was just waiting and trying to appear casual. "I'll be right out," she promised into her cell phone and looked out of the fourth-floor window into the street, followed by Stephanie. Nathan parked at the very entrance, got out of the car and looked up. "Howdy," Stephanie stated. "Interesting." Everything went wonderfully, as Mum would have defined it, classically. After several years of working in the north, Nathan had planned a 2-month vacation with his relatives. Then he planned to go to the capital, especially since it was not far away. 2 years ago, he had already bought a studio on the outskirts and had been renting it out all this time. Now he would ask the tenants to vacate the apartment for the owner. He would live there himself and look for a job. By the end of the 2nd month in his hometown, Nathan had added one more item to his plans. One Saturday evening, he unexpectedly came to visit Alice with a bouquet and a cake. He met Alice's mother and immediately announced, "Karen, I have serious intentions. I want to marry Alice, but I'll be honest, we'll have to wait. I need to find a job in the capital that will allow me to provide for my family. I'm used to good wages in the north. It's harder to find such a salary in the city. If I don't find it yet, I'll go back on shift." "You're a sensible man, Nathan," answered Karen, "but I can tell that Alice is hearing about your plans together for the first time." It was the plain truth. Alice had been caught off guard, and she wasn't good at pretending. For the past 2 months, she had fallen so self-consciously in love that everything else in her life had taken a back seat. She felt so good that she was afraid to think about the future so as not to jinx it with her plans. "I wanted to talk to you, both you and Alice, at once. Alice, will you marry me?" "I will," Alice replied. She had imagined it happening differently, but she was still pleased. She wanted to hug Nathan, but was shy in front of her mother. He too sat solemnly, like a director at a banquet. "I'll bring the ring from the capital. There's no good jewellery shop here. I'm sorry it was so awkward." "We understand that not everything can be calculated and planned," Alice's mother reassured him. "A spontaneous decision isn't always worse than a well-considered one." "Am I really lucky that my future mother-in-law is so wise?" Nathan exclaimed. "Unequivocally," Alice assured him, "and in general, I'm in favour of complete non-interference in the affairs of a young family." The following week, just before Nathan's departure, was Alice's birthday. Nathan ordered a banquet in the cafe for the closest people. On Alice's side were her mother and Stephanie. The groom came with his mother, sister and Sherelle. Sherelle almost didn't get out of Alice's arms. It was the first time she was at a banquet, even such a small one. All her holidays were celebrated at home or in the kindergarten. She looked at interest with the decorated table and the beautiful folded napkins. Alice's mother found and approached Nathan's silent mother. She could get along with all kinds of people. Margot, Nathan's sister, looked tired, but tried to seem cheerful and lively. Nathan gave Alice a new telephone for her birthday, and 2 days later he left for the capital. The usual routine began, and Alice tried her best to go to work and switch over. She even tried once again to learn from her mother the wisdom of cutting and sewing. "Do you miss me that much?" the mother asked understandably. "Yes," Alice admitted. "I didn't even expect it myself. I generally thought such feelings were invented for novels, to make women more interesting to read. I was sure I'd live in peace." "Wow, you are so naive." "Not with your genes," Mum smiled. "In consolation, I can say that I had strong feelings in my heart, and I don't regret it at all. I'm overjoyed." Nathan came every week at first, then every 2 weeks. Alice understood that it was hard to spend half a day on the road after a working week and then go back a day later. Sometimes people just need to sleep at home without anyone interfering. On New Year's Eve, Nathan invited Alice to his place to show his bride the capital. Alice carefully informed her mother about it and what she would say to it. "Alice, are you really an antique at this time? Do you think I'm going to discourage you? Of course not. We're not Victorian England, and you're not a schoolgirl, but a grown-up, independent woman. It has to happen sometime. I'm glad for you that it's not too soon and that it happens as it should. Love is important, believe me." Alice believed her mother. She was sure, without any proof, that her mother understood love. "Who are you going to spend the holidays with? Are you going to Grandma and Mr. Capadona?" Once Alice's grandmother, grandfather, and her mother lived in the same apartment. Alice didn't remember her grandfather well, as he died early, but her grandmother lived with them for a long time. 2 years ago she returned from the market and announced from the doorstep that she had met an elderly gentleman who selflessly helped her carry her groceries home. Grandma's acquaintance turned out to be the resident of the neighbouring town. He had a house where he lived alone. His children lived and worked in the capital and came to visit rarely. His wife had died a few years ago. Mr. Capadona came here for a friend's anniversary, and now he promised to visit more often, the grandmother said coquettishly. Alice and her mother laughed and forgot about it the next day, but Mr. Capadona wasn't joking. He came to visit Alice's grandmother, but he turned out to be a nice man who worked as a physics teacher until his retirement. Although he no longer taught at the school, he ran some kind of technical club for children. It was obvious that he adored Alice's grandmother. He didn't show it, but he didn't hide it on purpose. Alice found it a little funny at the time, but her mother said that she was just a young fool. 6 months later, Grandma and Mr. Capadona decided to move in together. Alice and her mother were invited to visit Mr. Capadona's house, so they could have peace of mind that their beloved mother and grandmother would live in decent conditions. Karen said that from now on she was calm for her mum, putting her in safe hands. "I'm going to visit Grandma and Mr. Capadona, of course," answered Karen to Alice's question. "And for New Year's Eve, I was also invited to my friend's summer house, to be honest, but I wouldn't have gone if you had stayed at home, because I'd have preferred your company. But apparently I'm having a romantic New Year's Eve too, so have a good time with Nathan." Alice and her mother laughed together. So Alice went to Nathan's house for New Year's Eve, and she had never had a happier New Year's Eve, even as a child, when everything was magical. During the day, Nathan showed her around the capital, and in the evening they returned to his studio and stayed alone. Alice helped pick out presents for Nathan's family, which she was supposed to take to them. Alice was a little surprised that Nathan didn't want to go to his relatives by himself. "We could spend half the weekend here and half at home." "Alice, my home is here. What is there to do there? We wouldn't get to spend so many nights together if we went there. With my mum, we're not particularly close, as you've noticed. I love her, of course, but we don't have much to talk about. Margot likes to whine as if it's someone else's fault that it's hard for her to raise her daughter alone. Of course, I feel sorry for her, but feeling sorry makes me exhausted." Yes, you're just tired. Alice hastened to justify him. She would find something to say to his mum and sister. She would think of something to make them feel good. Everyone gets tired of their loved ones sometimes. However, Alice couldn't remember her grandmother, mother, or herself ever getting so tired of each other. But men must be differently organized. Sometimes you have to leave them alone so that they have time to miss you. The New Year holidays were over, and the usual foggy, dark, everyday life had returned. The calendar hinted at the approaching spring, but Alice didn't believe it. Nathan visited Alice and his relatives less and less often, until eventually he stopped altogether. Alice got restless and anxious. The windows rattled at night from the winds, and Alice, unable to sleep, felt like bad news was knocking at the door, news that was being kept from her during the day. Weekends without Nathan seemed long and pointless. Her friend Stephanie became a little distant, focusing on her own things, and even stopped asking for details about Alice's private life. Alice gradually became friends with Margot, Nathan's sister. The soft-spoken Margot came over with Sherelle, and the young women drank tea and talked about life with Karen, read a book to Sherelle and played with her. In the spring, when it was still cold enough in the mornings to require gloves, but the parks were already filled with pale green smoke from the buds that had barely burst on the trees, Alice was sent to the capital for a conference for teachers of children's educational institutions. The young woman decided to surprise Nathan and drop by without calling. They hadn't seen each other in over a month, and she thought an unexpected meeting would make him happy. The conference started on Monday, and Alice arrived in the city on Sunday evening. She paid the driver and got out of the taxi at the corner of the apartment building. Further on there was roadwork, and she had to walk a little. As she walked closer to the entrance, she saw a shapely girl in a light, unseasonable mini-dress and a half-coat thrown over her shoulders, with pearly white, thick hair down to her shoulders. She was standing on tiptoes and kissing the lips of a young man who was lightly embracing her below the waist. To Alice's horror, she recognized the man as Nathan. "Should I say hello to your mother hen from you?" Stephanie's playfully melodic voice reached Alice. Then she laughed, and turning her head suddenly, noticed Alice. "Oh, you're a lucky man, Nathan. One woman goes away, another one comes," said Stephanie, and without waiting for a reply, she walked away in her usual gait. Stephanie had known her friend too long and well, and was convinced that Alice would not run after her and would not be able to force herself to move from her seat. Alice's travel bag seemed to freeze up in her hands, and the woman couldn't say anything out of shock and resentment. Nathan, as if nothing had happened, took hold of the bag and pulled it towards him. "I'll help with it. Let's go home," he said. Alice obediently followed him, as if in a fog. In the elevator, she stood looking under her feet, or in the corner, unable to raise her eyes to Nathan, as if she were afraid to see someone else, a stranger. At the apartment, Nathan sat down on the edge of the chair, with his back to the unmade bed, and said condescendingly, "Honey, I didn't think you were such a child as your kindergarten charges. It's not like you at all. Please, don't overreact. It's just male physiology. We don't see each other much. I'm a healthy man, but I have needs. I was sure you understood that and wouldn't come over without telling me, so as not to put me and yourself in such a stupid position. I would never allow you to run into each other here." "I'm not afraid of you coming to me at any time," Alice replied. "Darling, that's why I'm marrying you. You have all the qualities of a good wife. As for your pseudo-friend, these are the kind of women who enjoy spending time with, but only idiots marry them." "Yeah, you're not an idiot. You want a mother hen at home who's easy to fool." "Honey, Don't blow my mind, it doesn't suit you. People like her just want to assert themselves at the expense of others. And you're buying it like a little girl. She gets nothing but scraps. She convinces herself that she's beaten you, but she hasn't. As Alice listened to his speech, she realized with clarity that he did not consider himself wrong, but rather a gift, a prize to be fought for. She stood up silently and walked towards the exit. Nathan, with a conciliatory smile, blocked her path near the front door. Don't be silly, Alice. Where are you going for the night? To a hotel? I have a reservation. I'm here for a conference, not to catch you red-handed. Are you rehearsing an abused wife? Okay, when you cool down, call me where you're staying and when you're free. We'll go somewhere after my work and your conference. Nathan smiled amicably. He wasn't even thinking of playing remorse. At 7 p.m. the next day, when she had gotten back to her room, Nathan called. Give me the address. Where should I pick you up? He said after greeting. Alice had agreed with herself yesterday that she wouldn't answer his call. However, upon receiving his call, she decided that if he didn't care about her, he wouldn't call her now and would take the opportunity to easily get rid of the annoying friend. So he loved her after all. And Alice gave her the address. Nathan arrived quickly, brought a bouquet of white lilies, and offered to go to the premiere of the comedy. He was the same as before, joking confidently and opening doors with a warming. Alice wondered, was he pretending? Or did he really not see that she was frozen or petrified now? He was laughing at the movie, enjoying the evening, while Alice had little interest at all in what was happening on the screen and around her. Well, what's home, honey? Nathan suggested merrily. After the movie, we'll order delivery for dinner and a bottle of wine. Alice was silent, remembering Stephanie at the front door and the unmade bed. I can't go there yet. You realize it hurts me, right? And you're not even apologizing, even though it's so simple. Just because I love you doesn't mean you can do that to me. Here we go again, Nathan said curtly, wrinkling his nose. Everything was fine, and now you're back with your claims. Really, your element is kindergarten. You guessed your profession. He turned and strode leisurely to the car. Alice barely restrained herself from rushing after him. She was offended that she could not do anything about it, could not hold on to it, make him regret what he had done, and ask for forgiveness. She can't do anything. She's a hen. Stephanie is right. Unable to catch her tears, Alice jumped out of his car and went towards her hotel. The third day of the conference was over. Alice was going home. Nathan hadn't called. The woman had just settled down in the carriage when the phone rang. It was Nathan. I thought it would be better to speak to you directly, so there wouldn't be any misunderstandings, so you won't make up any unnecessary things for yourself. Nathan's voice sounded soft and almost indifferent. You and I shouldn't continue our relationship. I was wrong, I admit it. We're not right for each other. You take life too dramatically. We'll both get bored. If I'm feeling it now, you know there's no point. Be happy. Say hello to my family. I'll drop by sometime. After these words, he dropped the call. And at home, Alice was greeted by her mother. Alice knew her Karen's calm and sad expression well. Mum, you knew this would happen and you didn't say anything to me, not even once. Yes, I didn't like Nathan too much, but my opinion is just my opinion. Besides, I could have been wrong. And why would I ruin the best moments of your life? There were good things, weren't there? There were, Alex exhaled. Well, then everything is great and there's nothing to regret. There will be happy moments to come, just not with him, said Karen and hugged her daughter. Is that really how all men are? Why do I even need a relationship at all? Asked Alice through her tears. Come on, don't generalize. They're as different as we are. Loyalty is far from everyone's reach. Different things happen in life. I haven't judged anyone for a long time, But a kind, decent, loving man always behaves differently if his fiancée catches him with someone else. Even if he's not in love anymore, he'll still act differently. And you know that. A guy can be an irredeemable womanizer, but he can still be a good man. In Nathan's case, cheating is not the worst part. The worst part is how he behaved afterward. You've rid yourself of such a piece of dung, my daughter. That is worth celebrating. I lost a friend too, Mum. Stephanie and I have never even had a serious argument. We've trusted each other since childhood, and now, even if I really wanted to, I couldn't trust her in the smallest things. She went to him. That was deliberate. And Margot won't want to keep in touch with me after her brother and I broke up. Stephanie wasn't a friend, just a travelling companion. People like that are friends when it's profitable for them. When it's not favourable, they move on. So there's nothing to regret about this friendship. Margot's not a stupid girl. She'll figure out who she wants to be friends with. If she distances herself from you, it's because she's embarrassed about her brother. It happens to people with a conscience. By the way, when do you have to go to work? Karen could quickly jump from one topic to another. Alice was used to it, but sometimes she couldn't keep up with Mum's racing thoughts. Monday. Today is my arrival day, and tomorrow is my day off after the conference. What about going out of town for a weekend of sadness? The friend I spent New Year's Eve with has a house in a magical place, almost in the middle of the forest. There are already snowdrops in sunny places. Mum, you've never introduced me to any of your men. Is there something serious going on here? Just a man I'd love for you to meet. His name is Diego. He's both serious and non-serious, a little bit of everything. Anyway, he'll be happy to see me with you, or with your grandmother and Mr. Capadona in addition. There's a dog and 2 ginger cats. Let's go. 6 years had passed, and Nathan was going on vacation. It was the first time he had been so lucky. He was going on vacation alone without his wife. Layla had received an invitation to a friend's wedding in Spain and had flown away, leaving Nathan behind. Won't you even offer to have your husband accompany you for decency's sake? The man asked her. Nope, Layla said, shaking her head. There will be our yoga team, which you're not interested in, and I deserve a vacation with total relaxation. I want to see a real Spanish wedding, a Spanish mother-in-law, and other highlights. You can compensate by going somewhere else too. Daddy already knows you need a vacation. And Layla flew away, satisfied and happy. Nathan was annoyed that she wasn't jealous of him and was letting him go on vacation alone. They hadn't been living together for very long. Nathan had married the daughter of the technical director of a large company where he worked as an engineer. They had met at a summer corporate retreat, where employees could bring one of their family members with them if they wished. There were many people, contests, fireworks, pop music, and all sorts of fun activities. A full-figured but bright, confident brunette had approached him as he was bored at the bar counter on the outdoor veranda. "What kind of cocktail are you drinking? Will I like it?" the stranger asked. She wasn't exactly Nathan's type, but if she was showing interest, it was indecent to neglect the chance. Nathan ordered another cocktail. They drank and danced. "I'm going out for a short minute," Layla announced after the dance. "Stay here, don't leave." While Layla was away, Nathan's colleague whispered mockingly over his shoulder, "I'll tell you something while your lady goes to powder her nose. It's Mr. Kreutz's only favourite and spoiled daughter who doesn't want to work. She studies here and there and sighs that it's not hers. Her father is retrograde. He wants to get her married. She's about to turn 30, which is the age when girls should be worried about not getting married. So take my advice. She's not the best butterfly for your herbarium." Nathan mentally thanked his colleague, and he had completely lost interest in Layla, especially learning about her parentage. It was better to play the proper, boring workaholic so that Layla would get bored and switch to a more interesting man. But this trick didn't work, and Nathan caught Layla's eye. She preferred to think of herself as romantic, but she was determined, strong-willed and tenacious. Nathan, who liked to set the tone in relationships and win over girls, felt driven for the first time. Layla had asked for his phone number herself after leaving with her father from the corporate party, and she called him herself, never doubting that he would welcome the call. She would call him in the middle of the workday and passionately share all sorts of nonsense that girls usually share with their girlfriends. When he was silent for a long time, patiently listening to this nonsense, she would interrupt herself and ask, "You're not interested, are you?" Nathan didn't want to find out what would have happened if he had answered, "Not really." All the more because there was another alarm bell. Mr. Kreutz began to favour Nathan. He treated him well before as a promising, responsible technician, but he looked at him like everyone else and didn't pay much attention to him. And after the summer corporate party, he began to touch on non-work topics, and soon Nathan was invited to a fishing trip in a small circle. There was something to think about for Nathan. It seemed that they saw him as a future son-in-law. But Nathan simply did not want to complicate his life, feeling unwanted consequences. In fact, he didn't plan to get married yet. He was quite satisfied with the advantages of a single life. But he understood there might not be a second chance for a guy from a small town and a very ordinary family. Without the right acquaintances and favourable kinship, only routine work and slow career growth awaited him. Of course, Layla was bright and had good-natured cheerfulness. However, Nathan was confused by her feminism, which he could not understand. He seriously believed that most women's troubles came from its influence. In his understanding, a man earns money and dictates the rules. He imagined his wife as a pretty, tender woman who owed him a lot and recognized his supremacy. He had once had such a bride, almost 3 years ago, in his hometown. Alice was gentle, cozy and naive. It was unlucky for him that she had seen him with another woman and walked around with reproachful eyes, waiting for his repentance. After that, Nathan changed his mind about getting married, and now he could find himself in a dependent position where he would have to live by his own rules. Nathan still hadn't decided what line of behaviour he should take at the informal fishing meeting. Mr. Kreutz and his friends met Nathan cordially and did not show their superiority. Late in the evening, when the men were drinking and dining in a cosy cottage, Mr. Kreutz called Nathan to the terrace and asked him bluntly, "Are you serious with Layla? Just explain honestly, like a man to a man. I'll understand." "I love your daughter, Mr. Kreutz," Nathan declared. "And why are you dragging it out then? She's waiting. It's just the fashion for girls to make themselves independent now. But in fact, they are waiting for a man's initiative. You know it without me. You're not a boy as far as I can see. To be honest, I realize that I am not yet able to provide her with the standard of living to which she is accustomed," Nathan said. "I don't want to look like a cunning, provincial Alfonso. That's not for me. I realize that Layla is worthy of someone more successful." "Okay, I get your point. Now, I'll tell you. My daughter has my character, and we do not care that you do not have a status. It will all come if there is a desire. And you have it, and I can see that, and I'm going to help you. I care about my daughter's happiness. I don't care what anyone thinks. Layla never wanted to get married, but she wants to marry you. So don't hesitate and don't delay. Propose to her. We'll arrange a wedding for you as you want." "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Kreutz. I just want my daughter to be happy." That's how Nathan got married. Layla didn't want a crowded wedding. She saw a modest wedding and a romantic, exotic cruise. Nathan was grateful to her. Firstly, he was bored by crowded gatherings, and secondly, he realized that his provincial mother and sister would not look good in comparison with Layla's relatives and friends. Nathan called home and told them that he was getting married and that they would go on a wedding trip right away, and then they would stop by sometime to visit with gifts. Since then, Nathan has never gotten around to stopping by, even alone. His mother came a couple of times to visit them at their new apartment. She liked her daughter-in-law, sociable, friendly and energetic. Margot never came once. With Layla, Nathan was easy, as long as he did not contradict her. She turned out to be clever and observant. Nathan's day was scheduled in such a way that it would have been extremely difficult for him to carve out time for anything but work. Layla and hobbies she approved of, like fishing with her father. By the way, Nathan had really gotten into fishing. Mr. Kreutz, a tough strategist and tactician at work, turned out to be an uncomplicated, honest man who did not go into the maze of human psychology and was sincerely attached to his son-in-law. Now he wanted grandchildren, and he told Nathan about it as honestly as he had offered his daughter to be his wife. "Nathan, when are you planning on having kids? Layla is old enough and she wants to. I overheard her talking to her mother. You know, we'll help you with everything. Layla will be a great and caring mum." Nathan himself preferred Layla to take care of a child, ideally too. However, it hasn't worked out so far. So, while his wife flew to Spain for a wedding, Nathan went to Cyprus. During the day, he planned to go fishing in the Mediterranean from the yacht, and in the evenings, he planned to reminisce about his youth. Nobody saw Nathan off to the airport. Layla's mother had expressed a wish to do so, but she had almost overslept and decided not to go. Perhaps she wanted to see if the young, long-legged woman was flying with her son-in-law, but the desire to get a good sleep overcame her vigilance. At the airport, while looking for his flight on the electronic board, Nathan stumbled and almost twisted his leg when he stepped on something hard. He cursed quietly, looked down, and saw a child's cube with letters, almost the same one he had as a child. One cube had rolled farther away, followed by a few more, and a red-haired woman was collecting them in a box. Nathan hadn't thought of Alice in years, but he recognized her at once. She hadn't changed at all and was still busy with children's toys. The woman straightened up and looked around, searching for someone. She didn't see Nathan. Nathan took advantage of the situation, jumped up behind her, quietly handed her the unfortunate cube from her shoulder, and suddenly asked in a stern inspector's voice, "Miss Walker, what are you doing at the airport on a weekday? Are you accompanying a kindergartner on a tour of pilots and stewardesses?" Alice flinched faintly and turned around. For a few seconds there was a flicker of confusion in her eyes, but it was immediately replaced by a calm smile, the kind of smile one would use to greet a casual acquaintance. "Miss Walker sometimes takes a break," she replied with a soft, indifferent grin, ignoring the joke. Nathan wanted to continue the conversation, but Alice had already seen the people she was waiting for. A little girl with a mop of auburn curls and bright red sneakers was running toward her. Behind her hurried a panting, cheerful woman and a preschool boy. "Mum, it's okay, we're all washed up and everything's fine," the little girl reported to Alice. "Good for you, Foxy," laughed Alice. "Here are the cubes. Put them in Tommy's backpack, and don't look through other people's backpacks again." "But we played a custom with Tommy," answered the girl, who looked a lot like Alice. With the same hair and transparent skin, with slightly noticeable freckles. The only difference was her eyes, which were light brown or almond-shaped, but almost round, large and mischievous. "She will grow up to be gorgeous," Nathan suddenly thought. "Thank you for bringing order to this gang." Alice turned to her friend. "And I met an old acquaintance while I was waiting for you," she said, nodding, politely to Nathan. "We should get going. All the best. Have a good vacation or business trip." "Have a pleasant flight." Nathan nodded. The women separated the children, taking each of them by the hands, and went to the check-in line. Nathan's carefree, fun-loving mood disappeared somewhere. He handed in his suitcase and sat down at the bar with cognac and coffee. It seemed that at the opposite end of the hall, the same 4 people flashed by again. Alice's daughter is about 5 years old, Nathan thought suddenly. We said goodbye just about 6 years ago. I could very well be her father. But if the baby was mine, I'd be sure to be informed by Sister or Alice herself. So most likely Alice found comfort after we broke up, and someone seriously comforted her. All right, I'd like to think so. Anyway, she's not poor now. She's going to the sea with the baby. When we met, she'd never been further than the capital. Nathan didn't want to think about Alice any further. He began to play a game to guess which of the attractive girls in his line of sight was flying to the same place as him. But the guessing game wasn't distracting. There were no fascinating girls in sight, and he kept looking for Alice. Yeah, she has changed, after all. No, she didn't look older. She was still like a freshman girl, light, graceful and calm. But there was a confidence and something less elusive that made her stand out. Okay, stop. I should be enjoying my vacation, not reminiscing about my ex. Layla called from Spain several times a day, even counting the time difference, if she suddenly felt sad at night or, on the contrary, wanted to share her impressions immediately. In Limassol, Nathan suddenly realized that he was exhausted, and if he wasn't hanging out in a bar or at the beach, he was fishing in the company of a calm man of his father-in-law's age. Nathan was even a little afraid that he would like such a vacation. Was he getting old? It seemed too early for that. He returned home with fishing stories for his father-in-law, and his usual life continued. The next year, Layla drove him crazy with her mood swings. She couldn't conceive a child. It got to the point where she decided to go to the doctor. She hated going to the doctor and only made an exception for the dentist, presenting it as a sacrifice for beauty. And then one day she came in, unlike herself, detached, collapsed into a chair and said with a tremor in her voice, "I haven't a chance. Here." Nathan rushed to comfort her. He did feel a little sorry for her, and it wasn't fair that she was so unlucky. He said that doctors were sometimes wrong and that they could still have hope and keep trying. He himself was not upset. He had no burning desire to have children. The only real disadvantage he saw was that without children, Layla would have to guard and control him all her life. Another year later, Layla, having consulted her mum and dad, voiced her decision. They would adopt a child. Nathan was unused to showing firmness, but out of fright he remembered the past and answered categorically and adamantly, "No, don't even try to approach me with this proposal again. You've grown up like a hothouse flower. You don't know life. You have no idea what genes these kids might have. I don't have much faith in parenting when there's been 7 generations of marginalized people. No matter what you do, the genes will still show up. No, that's it." He was sure Layla wouldn't leave him because of this. She loved him too much. And soon another encounter from the past awaited him. Nathan was walking through the mall when he heard someone calling his name. He remembered, though not immediately, the woman who was standing before him. It was Stephanie. From the looks of it, it's not badly settled. "Hello, Stephanie, you look good." "Oh, come on. It's all the courtesy of duty. I'm waiting for a friend here. If you're not rushing, why don't we have coffee?" "Why not? Let's." They sat down in a cafe. He took only coffee. Stephanie took a martini. "I don't drive. My husband drives me. It has its advantages." "It's convenient, yes. Do you live here too?" inquired Nathan. "Yes, I moved 5 years ago. By the way, Alice lives here too. I learned it from my mum. I was wrong to fall for you then. I lost a good friend. Do you have a wife or kids? Or are you a real Casanova? I have a wife but no children. At least, not that I know of. Oh, so you don't know much, Stephanie remarked without any gloating. Come on, do you really don't know? Or you just don't want to know? Nathan had already guessed what she was going to tell him. Our Alice has a daughter with you, Nikki. She's already started school. You'd have to be a principled weirdo like Alice not to demand child support from you. I don't think she is my child. My mother or sister would inform me. The mother probably would inform you if someone told her. Margot most likely knows, but Alice asked her to keep quiet. When you and Alice broke up, she moved here a couple of months later too, and got a job at a private daycare centre. Her mother's boyfriend helped her. She married him later, just imagine. And my mum has a friend at the clinic. She told me that Alice was pregnant. It's definitely your baby. When it comes to Alice, you can be sure. So Alice and her mum didn't say anything to anyone, and when the opportunity arose, they left our town quickly. Why are you telling me this now? I don't know. Someone should have told you. You decide whether you need this information or not. Stephanie laughed quietly. Another 6 months passed. Layla had lost weight from worry. She even forgot Nathan's categorical statement about adoption and kept asking, demanding and crying. But one day she met him soft, calm and thoughtful. You already have a child, so you don't want another. You don't even ask where I went for 2 days. You're not interested. But I went to your sister. I've wanted to meet her for a long time, and I thought, why not now? They're both great, both your sister and niece. Margot let it slip that you have a kid. You know how hard it is to get rid of me. No, I'm not going to get hysterical. On the contrary, I want to offer you something good. Don't laugh. I've thought it over. It's a good thing. Why don't you meet your daughter? She'll come to visit us on weekends. We'll give her gifts, support her financially, and just be friends. We'll have a child in the house, and it won't be someone else's kid. I know it's not uncommon for a girl to be friends with her stepmother. Your daughter is so pretty. Margot showed me a picture of her. Her mum will be pleased when they suddenly have support. Layla, I found out accidentally 6 months ago that I had a daughter. You may not believe it, but it's true. If her mum had needed my support, she wouldn't have kept me in the dark for so many years. She's a very different sort of person. A bit odd. Margot told me how you two broke up. She tried to keep it emotionless, smoothing over the facts. Probably felt sorry for me. It's not for me to judge you. I had 2 pregnancies that I terminated. I was young, and now I can't have kids. So I'm not one to judge morality. If you're uncomfortable talking to your daughter's mum, I'll talk to her myself. Maybe it's better that way. I'll explain it to her honestly. Layla, I always thought that you were a practical, reasonable woman, at least adequate. Find yourself a hobby. If you worked like me, you wouldn't have time to think about nonsense like this. Have you ever thought how stupid I'd feel in this situation? Like you're thinking a lot about my feelings yourself. She was tempted to say something else, it was obvious, but she held back. It is great that she has learned to stop, at least for a while, Nathan thought. A week later, Alice and Nikki were returning from ballroom dancing class, walking slowly. Nikki was enthusiastically sharing her news, demonstrating the new moves she had learned that day. It was hard for her to stop immediately after the class. On the playground outside their house was an unfamiliar, well-groomed brunette with a beautiful but sad face. "Hello, are you Alice and Nikki?" she said affably, but somewhat tensely. "Yes, my name is Alice, this is my daughter." Alice replied in the same tone, but with a little wariness. "Alice, would you have a moment to talk privately? We can do it here." "Nikki, take a little walk in the playground, I won't be long." The brunette smiled as she gave the girl an attentive look and hastily introduced herself. "My name is Layla. I am Nathan's wife." There was a cautious silence between the women for a while. Alice gently broke it first. "Okay, let's get acquainted. I wouldn't even try to hide my bewilderment. Why do you need us? If we haven't threatened your family's budget so far, we won't continue to do so." "I realized that a long time ago. That's not why I came to you at all. I wanted to ask you to allow Nikki to meet her father. Has Nathan become so shy over the years that he needs intermediaries?" Alice laughed softly. "If he suddenly wanted to communicate with his daughter after learning of her existence, he would have come himself. I can see he hasn't changed. He's as indifferent to the feelings of women as ever. I'm sorry, Layla. I mean no offence. Just the fact." Alice felt an incomprehensible sympathy for her new acquaintance. There was no hostility from Nathan's wife, no sense of superiority. She did not scrutinize Alice, evaluate her, or compare her with herself. She just looked expectantly, thoughtfully choosing her words. "Alice, this is going to sound strange, but I would be delighted to have my husband's daughter in our home. I have no children of my own, and he doesn't want to adopt." She fell silent, again giving herself pause to choose her words. "I think I understand. No need to explain further." Alice stopped her. "I'll tell you a platitude. Doctors sometimes make mistakes. I work in a kindergarten, and I know many stories like this. In every kindergarten, there is a child whose mother thought she was infertile. Hope for your chance. Attitude helps a lot. And as for Nikki, I'm getting married in a month, and my future husband will be Nikki's daddy. She doesn't even doubt it. Imagine if this were your child and your situation. What would you do?" "Yeah, I understand. I won't come again. Sorry for the stupid idea and the wasted time. I'd have a very different conversation with me if I were you. And I'm sure you'd understand too," Alice replied. "Thank you." Layla nodded, turned and walked towards the parking lot, waving to Nikki as she went. I was never as lonely as she was, Alice thought, looking after her. In the evening she couldn't sleep. Of course she realized that there was nothing to be afraid of. Nathan wasn't going to show up with his parents' rights. He never liked to make things difficult for himself. When they broke up many years ago, Alice understood that she had fallen in love with a man she should have stayed away from in the first place. "How could I be such a blind fool?" she asked her mum rhetorically. "If women were smart in love, mankind would have died out long ago," Mum replied with conviction. "So that doesn't speak to your personal stupidity. It's just the way things work, and I've had that. See, I'm alive and enjoying life. I don't think I can ever really be happy about anything again." Alice grinned bitterly. "Dear, if you want to wear mourning for love, well, wear it. It will end on its own, you'll see. Maybe psychologists would burn me at the stake, but I am sure of that." Alice trusted her mother. Karen was not only a psychologist to herself, but also to others. Alice was sure that many of her clients had been coming to her not just for their clothing needs, but also to talk to her and share their problems, which didn't seem so terrible or unsolvable after such talking. After breaking up with Nathan, a series of happy coincidences followed. Karen introduced her daughter to her boyfriend Diego. His older sister, Irina, turned out to be the head of a prestigious private kindergarten in the capital and came to visit them. Even after learning about Alice's pregnancy, Irina convinced her to come live with her, saying, "Consider us already kin. Your mother and my brother are about to get married, and I live alone in a spacious apartment, and I can't stand being alone. I'd love it if you'd keep me company. If you don't like something or things don't work out, you can always go home." Alice hesitated for a moment, but her mother encouraged her, saying, "Don't think that I'm kicking you out, but I would go if I were you. It's not for nothing that fate throws us in such coincidences to make it easier for you to start over." That's how Alice found herself in the capital, living, working, and raising Nicky. And then one day, in a supermarket, she met Sam. She accidentally placed a chicken in his cart instead of her own. That's how they met. Eventually, Sam proposed to Alice, and they have been married for 3 years. Well, Alice found out that she was expecting another child. She went to the clinic and ran into Layla at the entrance. Nathan's wife, who had noticeably gained weight, exclaimed, "Look, you turned out to be right. You must be a good witch." Now Layla had become an entirely different woman, glowing with contented calmness. "I'm so glad you and Nathan are doing well," Alice said sincerely. "I'm doing fine, but I have no idea about Nathan. We don't communicate. After my conversation with you, we lasted only 2 months. I tried to persuade him to adopt a girl from the orphanage, but he wouldn't listen again. It was hard on me, and I even felt like I was going insane. Then I found out that Nathan had a young mistress, and I didn't feel anything special. I just felt sorry for the girl. I met her and drew a verbal portrait of Nathan because of women's solidarity. By the way, she dumped Nathan later too. As for me, I filed for divorce and went to sea. And there I had a vacation romance. But surprisingly, my resort affair turned out to be a serious love affair. Who knew? And now I'm about to be a mum. I'm pretty sure I know the reason why Nathan and I didn't have kids. He didn't love me at all, and that worked as contraception for some reason." Alice smiled and said, "Bring your little one to our daycare later." Layla laughed and said, "I was just about to say that I'll bring my baby to your daycare centre, but I don't want to wait that long. Come visit us with your husband." They exchanged phone numbers and Alice went home happy. She sometimes remembered Layla, and it was a sad memory. But now it was nice to know that more than one person's life had changed for the better. It seems like they're definitely going to be friends. If Alice feels that way, then that's how it will be.